Welcome to the module on flexible payments. In today's module, we will be discussing the production controls required to take in order to do the production of wet mix macadam using the plant. So, in short, we have the topmost layer is a bituminous layer, and below the bituminous layer you have materials known as road base or wet mix macadam. So these wet mix macadams are generally plant production, and today we will be discussing about the controls required in the plant in order to get the effective mix or the good quality mix to be laid in the project sites. So to start with, let us define the wet mix macadam. It is a road-based material consisting of crushed rock or slag, usually pre-mixed with controlled amount of water sufficient for adequate compaction. WMM shall consist of laying and compacting clean, crushed, graded aggregates and granular materials pre-mixed with water to a dense mass on a prepared subgrade, subbase, base or existing pavement as the case may be in accordance with the specifications of given by Ministry of Roads, that is MORTH. So the precautions one has to take during the production of WM mix is the material should not get mixed up in the 4 bins which is being provided in the start of the WM plant. The controls on the moisture to be accurately monitored. The pug mills should be frequently checked for uniformity in the mix. The height of fall needs to be kept as minimum as possible in order to avoid segregation. The precautions should be taken to avoid forming the heap in the trucks at the time of loading. The random sampling from the belt should be collected for checking the moisture levels and grading of the mix at regular intervals. Discharge from the collection hopper needs to be monitored in such a way that until the hopper is 3/4 full, the gates will remain closed and it will not get discharged into the dumpers. Each day before the start of the production, the calibrated points needs to be checked and ensured for accuracies. So if you see the photographs, the intermixing of aggregates, how the intermixing of aggregates will have an impact on the total quality of the mix, because all the bins are being designed for a given percentage of mix of 40, 20, 10 and dust. So if there is a intermixing of 40, 20 or 20, 10 and 10 and dust, then the percentage of aggregates of 40, 20, 10 and dust in the WM mix will not be accurate. It will either go up or it will go down. So there will not be any control as far as the gradation of the mix is concerned. So this, you can see the scenario how badly the intermixing can happen. So in order to avoid these intermixing, you need to have a separation between each hopper to ensure that each bin is designed for the given grade of aggregates only, that is 40, 20, 10 and dust. Then individual openings to be locked, like as shown in the photograph. You have a gate opening which is designed and calibrated for say around 85%, then this needs to be locked at that position, and each day before the start of the work this needs to be ensured that you have the gate opening unaltered and it is not being disturbed by any unforeseen incidents. So this will ensure that you have the consistency of the mix. And if you see the blades of the pug mills, you have to make sure that the blades are not wear off or torn off, and the gap between the blades and the walls needs to be clean, so that the mixing action has to be properly done. Because if because this is ultimately reducing the volume of the this is ultimately reducing the volume of the mix, because it is being clogged by the phases. The total volume will get reduced and the cohesiveness of the mix may get hampered. As you see the 3 photographs on the left side of your screen, The first is unfilled pug mill. Operating the pug mill in unfilled conditions will enhance the chances of wear and tear of the blades. Operating the pug mill with excess fill will enhance the chances of breakdown of the pug mill itself and result and producing a non-uniform mix. The optimum utilization, it is required that the pug mill should always maintain the optimum level of maintained to material to continue the mixing operation so that the uniformity in the mix can be well maintained. So it's always advisable that the first two photographs or the first two conditions shall be avoided, and the pug mill operation should always be continued in the live zone of mixing. Check for grading, like the individual grading of the aggregates used in the WM mix shall be checked at regular intervals so that the mix grading will be achievable, whether you are mixing 40, 20, 10 and dust in the required proportions and the same mix is being achieved or not. There we need to provide a flare on top of the discharge unit so that the segregation of the mix can be avoided, because as you know that the mix is wet, which is getting discharged into the hopper and being stored in the hopper. Now since the mix is a combination of coarse and fine materials, coarser particles will tend to move apart and the finer particles will try to stick to the belt. So this is how at the junction where the discharge is being taken place, the material will always have a tendency to segregate for the coarse and the fines. So this is how the segregation will take place. So if you put a flare, the bigger size particles will hit the flare and then will come back to the finer particles, and then under that conditions the segregation can be minimized. We also talked about the restriction of height of fall of the materials during the discharge and loading period. So normally what happens is during the loading the height sometimes gets more because of the undulations of the locations in the bottom where the vehicle is being parked. So it's always required and necessary to fill the undulations in order to make a proper platform so that the vehicles will come and stand on that platform, and the material is being feeded or discharged in the vehicle at a set height. Cut the cone during loading. It's always important to cut the cone being formed when the discharge of the material is taken place by giving a small jerk of the vehicle. Why it is important? Because the cone will always develop the accumulation of fines at one location, and when this material is being fed to the paver, the fines will be fed separately to the paver and the coarse will be fed separately, and that ultimately will give an impact on the paved surface, showing accumulation of fines in the middle and coarser particles on both the sides of the pavers. So in order to avoid that, a jerk will make sure that the material is being moved, and the next load when it comes, you will have a mixture of coarse and fine materials. During the loading and transportation, the loading and transportation in open dumpers should be avoided, as this will lead to this will lead to the reduction of load carrying capacity of the dumpers as well as the wastage, because while moving the dumpers, it will always have a tendency to fall the wet mix macadam on the roads during its movement from the plant to the paving locations. So it's always advisable to move to transport these materials in a closed dumper rather than the open dumpers, unless until it is becoming very necessary to achieve the targets. So to summarize this module, we talked about the definition of the wet mix macadam. We talked about the plant requirements. We talked about the controls required during the production, checks for oversize of the materials, the check for the required moisture content, the check for segregation of the mix, and the check for basic loading conditions into the dumpers. In the next module, we will be covering the precautions generally taken during the laying of WM mix in the field. Till then, thank you.